hello, everybody. It is I, the Wolfman, coming to you live and in charge here at the Starlite podcast. I am the head projectionist, the owner, and the maitre d' sometimes. And with me today is the maintenance man, the concession workers extraordinaire, the man who makes sure everybody's comfortable, Dr. Chaotic. Say hello, Doctor.
Uh, right. Next time we get on the Deca, we probably shouldn't order all these weird ass plastic art statues.
Oh, I love these statues. They liven up the place.
And I'm also pretty sure one wrong, one striped, and they're choking a motherfucker like in Black Christmas.
True. Anyways, we are here today to review 1968's Barbarella. Yep, Barbarella coming in at $1.38. In the far future, a high sexual woman is tasked with finding and stopping the evil Duran Duran. Along the way, she encounters various unusual people. In other words, we're trying to recreate a European comic book. Pretty much.
As you do.
Yep. Directed by Roger Vadim. Written by Terry Sumner and Claude Brulé. It also has Jane Fonda, John Philip Law, Anita Pallenberg, Milo O'Shea, Marcel Marceau in one of his first speaking roles. Bet you didn't know that. Claude Dauphine, Veronica Vendel, Giancarlo Cobelli, Serge Marcon, Nino Musco, Franco Gula, Catherine Chevalier, Marie Theresia Chevalier, Umberto de Gracia, David Hemmings, in his most thinnest, Ugo Tognazzi. I wanted to say that. Honey Autumn, Sylvia Bianca, and a cast of thousands. Doc, this is your first time. What you think?
Technically my second.
Your second? Okay.
But second in full. I watched it once years ago.
Okay.
And I've seen clips, but I hadn't watched it in full in a while.
I see.
So now I have, and it's fascinating how something so seeked in science fiction can also be so unbelievably dumb, and I kind of love
it. Welcome to Euro Sci-Fi, where it's cool and chic outweighs fact.
Yeah, like, as legendary as this movie is, this is definitely one of those cases of style over substance.
Yes. And I will say yes again.
So I specifically chose this one because Criterion was doing a great little collection on Terry Southern, who, for if you're not familiar, he was kind of a big screenwriter during the late '60s, then through the '70s, kind of one of the in demand for new Hollywood writers.
Yes. He was known to be out there. Not monkeys out there, but out there nonetheless.
Oh, you saw that, huh?
Yeah. It's nice to see that you revisited Head.
Yeah, boy.
And this is the sort of criticalist sort of post. So you have to shield that out now, man.
Okay, yeah. So one day randomly I decided to revisit a movie we watched years ago called Head, which was the movie partially written and starring the Monkees.
Mm-hmm.
Specifically, I say partially written because the main credited writer is Jack Nicholson.
Jack Nicholson, yeah. They had like a little help.
Yeah, so it's one of those things where it's like I was kind of feeling it. I just wasn't sure I wasn't sure why. I just, for some reason, I just wanted to revisit Head and just decided that instead of doing it just on my own, I figured I put it on Criticlist, and well,
Wow, I'm not following you. What is going on?
Well, technically, I'm on your friends list. That's why.
And your friends list, yeah, okay.
Oh,
There we
there.
go. There. Get you up and running here.
Sorry for the side tangent, folks. We'll
Side
get
tangent, but still, we gotta show this.
Yeah. So I ended up writing it kind of as an interesting piece, and yeah, you notice the score.
Mm-hmm.
I was so tempted to make it lower, but I realized that this movie is one of the most interesting mixed bags I've ever watched in my fucking life.
Yeah, after a second look, you wondered why you gave it a higher score.
I didn't even think we did it a higher score. It's just my feelings are more developed now.
Right.
And like shifted a bit, because when we talked about it, we talked while we talked about the monkeys in the context, we ended up shifting. A lot of our conversations was kind of revealed around Jack Nicholson and his part in writing this and kind of his style.
Right.
This one more specifically, when we watched it again, a lot of the stuff I was focused on, I was more focusing on specifically the monkeys' specific involvement in how their feelings on the goings on kind of influenced the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And I concluded that the monkeys were in self-flagellation, which the mind has never fucking seen. Like, they get, like, if we're talking about shame, they put some Catholics to shame. Some Catholics to shame. Ba-doom-tish.
Ba-doom-tish, yeah.
But the problem is that it feels like a lot of it was, like, technically it has spoilers, so that's why you're not seeing the text, but I'll sum up my biggest problem, which
you want me to put the text up?
If you want, man, that's up to you.
I mean, it's your essay.
Yeah, folks, you gotta realize if you follow me on Critic List, and Roy, you've done this too, but I tend to do this more often. Mm-hmm. When I write reviews on Critic List, I get fucking detailed about my thoughts.
Right.
Well, detailed on a bunch of tangents, depending on who you ask. But I kind of theorized that kind of revived and sort of said my biggest problem, which I think I did say this back when we did it, but specifically more now. This movie is either has no idea what it wants or knows what it's doing, but is not giving the audience an inch.
Right. Yeah, I'm leaning towards the latter.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, a lot of this, again, it's self-flagellation in the sense that the monkeys did not like their plot in life at the time.
No.
Is a gentle way to put it.
Right. And they were trying to get out of it the best way possible, and it just didn't work, folks. You have life in music sometimes.
Well, it worked, but not the way they wanted it
to do. Yeah, okay.
Because the big thing about Head is not that they just wanted to get out of being the monkeys, is that they wanted the monkeys to change into something more quote unquote real, like genuine, being artistic and stuff. Specifically, kind of with the frustration of while playing their own instruments live, they weren't allowed to really be a part of the songwriting, both on the TV show and in the studio for the albums.
Mm-hmm.
That's what bugged guys like Mike Nesbitt specifically. Although I have also heard that Davey and Peter kind of had their own gripes about it, but it was the main biggest frustration somebody had was Mike. That everybody had was Mike.
Mm-hmm.
So you have that. Then you also have sort of trying to evolve with the times, but the problem is people go to you because they didn't want to be with the evolving times. If that makes any sense,
right?
Because as much as maybe probably some people don't want to admit it if they're like hardcore fans, but a lot of people generally agree that the Monkees' fame and popularity is because there were Beatles fans that didn't want to follow the Beatles through the psychedelia. They had, Because keep in mind, the Monkees' general popularity started in 66. 66 is right around the time the Beatles gave up touring and decided to go fully studio. So that's where you get. So while they hadn't fully gone psychedelic and madness yet, that wasn't me till like 67, 68 with Sgt. Pepper. You had Revolver and Rubber Soul kind of shifting towards that direction. And the more and more the Beatles were still in the spotlight at the time, the more and more it was revealed stuff like them hanging out with the Maharishi, admitted the admittance of taking lots and lots of LSD,
yeah.
specifically with George, specifically from John and George. So you have this. So the Beatles themselves had essentially taken control of their destiny by shifting priorities. And since they're the biggest band in the fucking world, who the fuck's gonna stop them?
Right.
EMI wasn't. They were. EMI was like, what? You're doing this weird hippie shit? Is it gonna get us records? Yeah, probably. Okay, cool. Do whatever the fuck you want.
Right.
Because that's the thing. It's like, wait, how? Like, why did the Beatles get that much chance and not the Monkees? Well, I argue the audience, but I would also argue the difference in record labels probably didn't help.
Right.
Because Beatles specifically, while eventually they would get their own publishing rights with Apple Records and all that, but of course that was the sign of the end times. Technically all their distribution went through Capitol and EMI. And while Capitol resisted for the longest time selling the psychedelic Beatles until Sgt. Pepper happened and just blew the fucking lid off the place, so they said, screw it, roll with it. EMI was more amicable, I guess.
They were willing to bend.
Yeah, because they sort of realized Beatlemania still exists. It's just that they're taking it's instead of teeny boppers, it's hippies, and they're still gonna buy a shit ton of records. So, fuck it.
Right. I got you.
So but Monkees in particular, I forget specifically. They might have been RCA.
They were RCA.
Yeah. So with RCA, they were more stringent until it was too late. Specifically because of RCA Victor. Yeah. So because the problem is that RCA was planning to sell to the kids that didn't want to be hippies. Right. Problem is the kids that didn't want to be hippies were either really conservative, square teenagers or little kids.
Little kids, yeah.
So
nobody wants to be baby's first boy band.
Yeah, so the Monkees were kind of stuck being, hey, we're the Monkees, and people say we monkey around.
Yeah.
I will say, though, if you want to review the review and just stick to the opening quote, a thing I sometimes do on Critic List is I post a quote from the movie in front of the review. And specifically, I posted...
To know what's real, living is a lie. The porpoise is waiting. Goodbye.
That is the ending of this Porpoise song, which, if you remember, that's the song that plays when Mickey jumps off the bridge. Right.
I know it was the aquatic song, yeah.
Yeah, and it's literally called Porpoise Song. So the whole idea was A, to let the Monkees indulge in their more psychedelic side, and B, sort of show their existential dread.
Yeah. A bit, yeah.
So we should probably wrap up and get to Barbarella because it sounds like we're talking about the Monkees more than Barbarella. But
you can find us at criticalist.com
under Chaotic Doctor. Yeah, there's more if you want. There's more reviews like it. I've reviewed stuff. I've reviewed classic stuff. I've reviewed some more modern stuff. I've also been a lot more angry, as you can. If you see my reviews of stuff like Man of Steel and Stargate, I've been more introspective like this with stuff like this, and more kind of overthinking, but also just wanting to kind of root out questions, get more engagement. Specifically, and a good example is a review I did of The Keep, where I talked about the idea of being able to finish and to love an unfinished work. Because if you know the story of The Keep,
yeah.
Anyway, speaking of baton patching hatchet jobs, back to Barbarella.
One more thing. He's also the music director at OTEP, only at Wolf's Den Podcast at podbean.com. Check it out.
Yeah, folks, I know we usually save the whoring ourselves for the ending, but hey, why not? Anyway, back to Barbarella.
Back to Barbarella. Yes, so Barbarella, what was your thoughts?
It's dumb, it's stylish, and I love it, but also this is definitely from this era of sci-fi specifically, and even more Euro-centric stuff, this would not be my first choice.
No?
Like, it is essential. I will say that. I'm not saying it's not.
Right.
It's just it wouldn't be the very first movie I make you watch if you want disinterested. Because
I mean, what are you trying to show? Like Terry Southern or?
Well, specifically for this one, for Barbarella, well, probably definitely not Terry Southern, because let's be honest, Terry Southern, while he's credited with him and Vadim, this script was kind of legendary passed around. If you see the collection of collaborators.
Oh yeah,
that's basically
you have
Biddle riding gas through the gates.
Yeah,
that's basically WGA code for script doctors.
Vittorio Bonicelli, Clement B. Wood, Brian Degas, Tudor Gates.
Yeah, so legendarily, the script was kind of passed around and chopped to bits. And that's because, if I remember correctly as well, they were rewriting scripts while they were filming.
As you do in Eurofilm.
Yeah, that just seems to be the case. But definitely not. Well, definitely not with Terry Southern. I mean, it's hard to recommend Barbarella when Easy Fucking Writer is right there.
Right.
But also, specifically while watching it got me thinking of that kind of interesting, weird in-between era of sci-fi where we're past the atomic age, but we hadn't reached Star Wars yet.
So we're just flailing around trying to grab something that will at least, feel close to us.
Yeah, because that's the thing you got to remember, that while now, yeah, it's ubiquitous and almost makes the general idea of Star Wars makes some people's heads instantly grow a tumor and name it Jar Jar. We got to keep in mind, in 1977, Star Wars ended up one of the biggest game changers for Hollywood, not just in sci-fi, but for blockbusters in general. It was the 1-2 punch of that and Jaws kind of birthed the blockbuster.
Right.
So you have this weird in between like maybe like what would be a good example of like the end of the atomic age, like Day the Earth Stood Still, or maybe something later in like the early 60s.
Well, what do you mean by the end of the atomic? You mean at the end of atomic positivity?
More specifically, I think of the atomic age. I think about the sci-fi that revolves around giant.
You had the kaiju era, of course.
Yeah,
it didn't start with Godzilla, by the way. It started with them. It started with the beginning of the end.
And you could technically go even earlier. We can talk about Beast of 20,000 Fathoms and King Kong. Because, we got to give love to Willis O'Brien.
Willis O'Brien. Shout out to William O'Brien and Harryhausen.
But generally, when we talk about the atomic age, we talk specifically about movies, sci-fi in particular, where a lot of the concentration was on the fascination with atomic energy and the atomic bomb. And ironically, hey Roy, I can find another way to plug my critic list. I did a review of The Atomic Cafe, where it talks, well, that's more specifically on the U.S. military and propaganda side. It does show the sort of almost not the transition from a power given us by God to almost a novelty.
Right.
So basically, if you ever remember in the Fallout games, you see all the atomic propaganda and how Vault-Tec gives us all the convenience with the power of the nuclear atom.
Well, that was even before the 50s with the uranium rush of the late 40s.
This is true, especially post World War II.
Of course, World War II, because the thing to do was becoming a uranium prospector.
Yeah, but the big thing, when it's specifically the atomic age is specifically tied to the 50s and early 60s, is because a lot of atomic age memorabilia and Americana is also tied to 50s Americana by way of like the nuclear family or the idea of like your younger kids going to buy comic books and pulp novels.
Right.
So you have like how like a lot of atomic age stuff was tied into convenience for the housewife. So things like
cheap energy could allow you to run a lot more things.
Yeah, everything from a new washer and dryer, which just kind of got invented and was big at the time, or the idea of or how while we were still in the early throes of television, you can have.
You had the small stuff.
But I'm talking specifically about when we think of the early age of television. We think of small, like 13-inch box, dials on the left, on like legs with little antenna. You turn it on, you see Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz. You feel me?
In fuzzy black and white.
Yeah. I will say though, again, we'll go back to Barbarella in a second.
It ties into it. Don't worry.
But also, Roy, one of these days, I do kind of want to do Lucy and Desi's films together, because one of the stories I love is the stories about the long trailer.
Right. I got you.
And about how the studio thought no one was going to watch it because they could get Desi and Lucy for $3, but they didn't take into mind that if you can see them in a movie, you see them on a bigger screen and in color.
Right. Yeah. Technicolor
too. So yeah, like you can see Lucy's a redhead like a motherfucker.
But what we're trying to say is, it was big. Atomic energy and atomic science fiction was really big in the 50s and the early 60s, and then Honda comes in around and he makes a big old list to squash those hopes, and then we start getting stuff like Watkins, the War Game, and sort of the anticlimactic dystopia.
Yeah, that's sort of the problem. The big thing about any atomic positivity, it led into the fact that the more and more we learn about the after effects of said bomb, the more and more we realize that holy shit, this thing is fucking terrible. We should be nowhere near it.
Right.
Because keep in mind, after World War II was one of the first. Well, not the first. Was more in radio than in television. A lot of the aftermath was televised and documented.
Yep.
Yeah. So you see the after effects of radiation poisoning and radiation sickness. You see skin peeled and almost melted, revealing muscle and bone. Just kind of this mad, gory scene that for a lot of sci-fi writers kind of kicked in their brains like, no, this thing in the wrong hands can mean the fucking apocalypse.
Right. And it was just not Hiroshima and Nagasaki. There was Dragon 3 as well.
Well, yeah, fair enough. Dragon 3, you can argue the test in like the Nevada desert and the Bikini Atoll. Specifically, of course, that in the Nevada desert, they actually had fucking U.S. soldiers in bunkers in like trenches during an atomic blast, and there were some interviews with soldiers after the fact, and all of them are basically dying of cancer,
right,
or like skin disease, and like, yeah, fall fucked up in the name of science. But anyway, back to relating it to Barbarella. So you had the atomic age, and then when that sort of positivity and enthusiasm kind of started to morph into skepticism and almost nihilism. Sci-fi kind of went off in two different directions. You had the more apocalyptic sci-fi, the more understanding of what humankind can rough in the wrong hands, but you also had the more pulpier side kind of move.
Yeah, the pulpier positive side that was more exploring. This was also during the budding era of space exploration.
In the space race, yeah. So it's this idea of going out to farthest regions throughout the galaxy and seeking new worlds and aliens and all these other things. And of course, the biggest example of that came out in '69, Star Trek. That was
Star Trek was a lot earlier.
Was it a lot earlier? I always hear it's like late '60s.
It's late '60s, but it wasn't '69.
Was it '67?
I think '67, but you're thinking 2001.
There's 2001 too, yeah. There's Star Trek 2001, and then we had this slew of like pulpy space exploration.
Star Trek was '66.
Okay, it was '66. So like, we get Star Trek, we get Lost in Space, we get Forbidden Planet is another great example. So you have this kind of evolution into us being more spacefaring people to seek out new worlds and new galaxies, boldly go, yada yada yada. Yeah. I'm not Mike. I'm not reciting that whole thing. But so that kind of evolved into the pulp space adventure, or specifically, I think William Burroughs called it ray gun gothic. Which is a term I really love and I want to use more of because that sounds fucking amazing. And it's also what I want to name a fucking prog rock band. And I know the name of my first album under that prog rock back name. It's a primitive state of neurological immaturity.
Say that 5 times fast, people.
I'm not even going to try. So Barbarella in particular came out around this time where this is soaked in pulp novels and comic books and sci-fi and in the space exploration and sci-fi.
And also keep in mind, the European film system was starting to get their legs back again.
True. Like this is, of course, also it helps that this being an Italy production, this was them kind of slowly injecting themselves into the international market after the death of Fuckface. I forget his name.
Fuckface? I never heard of Fuckface. Please expand me more on this Fuckface.
Well, I call him Fuckface because his entirety of his propaganda is just his face with C all over the goddamn place.
Okay.
Mussolini. There we go.
Mussolini? Okay, Mussolini. Okay.
Yeah. So I remember shit like Fallout and Ray Gun Gothic, but I don't remember fucking Mussolini. Anyway.
Come on, man.
The education system has failed me. Anyway, so after World War II, a lot of things happened after World War II. It's obvious. Right. The spread of cultures around America and Europe was kind of expanded and sort of accelerated, especially because you had stuff like the French. I forget if it was implementing a rule or repealing the rule. I think it was repealing the rule about how most French cinemas had to be 60% French movies. Right. So you had the blasting of imports of American movies coming into France in Europe. And that's what kind of evolved. That sort of transitioned into French New Wave and Nouvelle Vogue with guys like Godard, Varda, Truffaut, Derrida, like that kind of brands. But you also have
the writer, but okay.
Oh, right. Sorry, French New Wave does deal a lot with Derrida's philosophy as long as like Barthes in them, so I kind of got them confused. My bad. So
no.
The French ghosts are gonna haunt me from the grave and judge me freely. Anyway,
look at this Yankee devil. judging other films. What is wrong with him?
And again, funny enough, I can tie it back to Critical List because the first thing I ever reviewed on here was 2 or 3 things I know about her. Anyway, so you had that kind of starting in France, but in Italy, it seemed like that's where all the genre kind of spread to.
Well, what it is was they were trying to find the 50s. They were just concentrating on putting out cinema altogether, and then once they got like a whole cachet of wealth, they started going to the genre. So you had the Gothic thriller come out of Italy. You have Bava, you have Freda. What's his nuts?
Which one?
The guy's name that's on Inglorious Bastards that they didn't know Italian except that one name.
Umberto Lenzi?
No, Lenzi was a lot later.
Oh wait.
We're talking
about that's
60s.
Federico Fellini.
Fellini.
Yeah, there you go.
Marciani. Yeah, you had a lot of genre folk just setting the par for European genre cinema. And then it accumulates with Bava having Mask of the Demon picked up by AIP. And it just blows up.
And thus we get the Italian film scene that I think a lot of us in our circles know. Everything from giallo to spaghetti westerns to
pepla to crimi. Well, no, crimi is German.
Policio Tecci, the Sword and Sandal, aka the Hercules movies.
Yeah, that's pepla. Yeah,
pepla. So we get that kind of that sort of spread and just blast of genre pictures in Italy. So all that combines into this one in particular, specifically that the fact that it is credited as a France and Italy co-production.
Right.
And so you have the producer Dio De Laurentiis, but also directors like
Roger Vadim,
Roger Vadim, and then of course random American Terry Southern, because hey, it was the 60s. A lot of Americans were living in Europe at the time, mostly to get away.
Couldn't get it in Hollywood, and I don't mean that in a negative. It's just there was a smothering system that wouldn't let them grow.
Yeah, you got to keep in mind another thing we can tie into this, going back to Terry Southern, we can tie in New Hollywood, because a lot of the New Hollywood writers took a lot of their talents originally to Europe and started making movies there, which then spread back to America and then allowed the New Hollywood and the film school brats to kind of take over. People like Peter Bogdanovich,
Francis Ford
Coppola, technically George Lucas, again, tying it all back to Star Wars. Steven Spielberg as well. So you have this sort of merging and cultural exchange at the same time, where you're getting Americans merging with European culture, but also exchanging cultures to a way to be interpreted differently. Europeans indulging in American culture and getting us genre flicks, while Americans were indulging in European culture and getting more sort of the European art scene and sort of looking at it more film in more specific ways. Basically a lot of Orson Welles worship. Like
Orson Welles, they loved the Orson Welles over there.
Oh God, especially Peter Bogdanovich. Jesus.
Yeah. Definitely.
So you kind of have this insane sort of merging of cultures and thoughts and ideas and schools of thought generally, and just kind of bubbles and culminates until Star Wars happens, and all of a sudden Jaws and Star Wars happens, and all of a sudden it's the blockbuster.
Yeah, and to credit Italy, it's sort of what was the ultimate rub off with Star Wars. They had taken George Lucas, taken what he liked, the serial, and he used the more European approach to it with miniatures, with special effects, doing what you can with special effects the best you can.
True, but also probably as well, we can also throw a little bit of a nod to what happened after the war with Japan and sort of the American sort of cultural invasion that kind of turned Japan, and then the great economic boom happened, and thus Japan becomes this great electronic titan because of companies in silicone and all these other
Right.
things. That's also where we get stuff like anime, because it's a lot of Japanese mangaka and artists interpreting American cartoons,
who were inspired by the French comic, which is what we're watching with Barbarella.
Yeah,
it's a loop. It's a loop.
It's wibbly wobbly, timey wimey, and somehow we can make a lecture. But also, it's a lot more interesting to talk about what's happened around the movie than the actual movie.
Well, I mean, it's also, if you're looking in at a comic books perspective, it's the first time comic books get real credit, as something. Because this is Jean Laurent Forest work of Barbarella. This would lead to stuff like Danger Diabolique being made, L'Odyssey Blaze. There would be a short European comic scene.
Yeah, that gave that. Fortunately or unfortunately, a lot of those movies we know them because more than likely 9 times out of 10 MSC3K covered them.
Yeah.
Because that's how I found out about like Diabolique and Satanic, and even you could argue Secret Agent Super Dragon, but that's another thing.
But then you had Lucky Luke, Dr. Justice,
Argos,
yeah, all that good stuff. This was sort of the front leader, leader. So that happened, but it's a very stylistic Euro science fiction. It's Europeans trying to figure out how to do sci-fi, and they've done it a lot before. But the more what we experienced is sort of smuggled in Soviet sci-fi, so this was totally different from us.
True. Yeah, and also, fun fact, we can tie in one more cultural thing for us. We can tie this into specifically late 60s kind of club and mod culture, specifically with a lot of the dresses and specifically even the celebrities involved, because specifically our two female leads being Jane Fonda and Anita Pallenbaum. You have Jane Fonda, literally one of the biggest sex symbols of the late 60s.
Right.
And Anita Pallenbaum, a.k.a. legendary model and girlfriend to Brian Jones of the Rolling Stones.
Yes.
So,
yes, pretty.
Yeah, so you have this weird sort of convergence, I guess is the best way to put it.
Right. It is a pulp culture convergence that just looked really weird for its time.
Yeah, like, as much as specifically some of the best parts of the movie are the effects in their own way, but specifically like the miniatures and the matte paintings are very cool for like that.
They're very cool, yeah.
That classic 60s sci-fi looks. I love the designs of certain mechanic things and the spaceships and some of the weapons and all these other things. Then we get to the fashion and some of the architecture, and it's like, I get what you're going for, and it would have been cool at the time, but I look at it now, you have a weird obsession with sheer shoulder pads and plastic. What the hell is going on here?
One word for the future: plastics.
Yeah. Well, in some weird way, they're not wrong, considering we're stuck with microplastics being in every single part of our being now.
Right.
So, hey, Barbarella, something from Barbarella came true. So, it's just this convoluted, and we talk about the actual story. It's simple and kind of stupid.
It is simple and kind of stupid. We're trying to find a scientist who created a death ray. We need to stop him. We realize, he's just there to establish himself with a really ready-made army to rule the universe with his death ray, and oh my god, a lot of sex.
Yeah.
Oops, all sex.
Yeah. That is one thing where it's like, that's kind of one of the reasons why I wouldn't. While I would still recommend this movie and be it essentially wouldn't be my first pick, because there are some things about it that are a little bit. Specifically, God bless Jane Fonda. She's a legend, and her performance is well done. Barbarella's kind of a fucking ditz.
Yeah.
Like, there's only really two specific scenes where Barbarella gets to be badass sci-fi action hero. When she's riding around with Pygar, played by John Philip Law, riding around shooting down spaceships, and apparently had so much sexual stamina, she found a way to outfuck a fuck death machine.
Yes. You heard it here first, ladies and gentlemen. A fucking death machine.
Not a fucking death machine in the verb sense.
A death machine that fucks you to death.
Yes. Or by the design of it, as a line I love from a movie from somebody who covered this said, a literal sex organ.
Yes.
And also, it doesn't really help now that I think about it. You have the organ and the chamber is kind of ionic in nature. So, yeah, it's a little sex organ. And in fact, the first thing that popped in my head is, I imagine this is a metaphor for guys trying to eat pussy for the first time.
Kind of, sort of.
Because you see what I mean, though, right? You see the guy, like, trying to get in there, trying to find all the right spots, and then all of this, and then the machine breaks down because you actually find the right spot, and the girl's all good. So basically, it's guys trying to find the clitoris for the first time. Anyway, right. So we should get more into that as well. Yeah, one of the big, well-known, beloved things about Barbarella is that it is very sexual, because we were in the late 60s, sexual revolution, plus this being very fucking European, specifically very French and very Italian. Sex is involved. In fact, sex becomes a plot point.
Yes.
On multiple occasions.
Yes.
So, to sum it all, to kind of get the ball rolling, and specifically, Barbarella is tasked by the President of Earth. Roll with it.
Yep.
Find an astronaut and scientist, Durand. And I specifically sound out the D, because if I say it how most people say it, you get a song immediately in your head. And while that's not unreasonable, and in fact it was intended, I don't want to get there yet. So, yeah, sorry. As much as I would love to, I don't want to talk about Rio and how she dances in the sand. So,
I'm like a wolf. Every time I see girls on film.
Yeah, folks, we'll get there. So Barbarella is sent to Tau Ceti, which I'm not gonna lie, until I read the subtitles and how it's spelled, it sounded to me like Tau City, as in Taocity, and I was very confused.
No, that's like two big letters.
Yeah, it's because of specifically the way they pronounce it. Mm-hmm. Like, it's the same thing with Sogo. I thought it was Soho. So my thought is just they were invading a post-apocalyptic Chelsea. But she's sent there, and she crash lands in the icy part of the planet due to a magnetic storm that, for some reason, looks like sparklers. But let's roll with it.
Right.
So she glass lands and gets attacked by twins who capture her and plan to play and torture her with weird biting vampire dolls, which gave me one weird flashback. And Roy, I don't know if I'm alone in this.
Puppet Master?
Well, there's Puppet Master's the obvious one. The one I was thinking was, do you remember when we were introduced to the planets in Holy Mountain, and one of them made like the bisexual Filipino vampire dolls or whatever the fuck?
Yeah.
I was reminded of that for some reason. I don't know why that
came into my head. And especially it doesn't help that later on when we get to Sogo and the City of Night, a lot of the designs make me think that this is what Aronofsky would have designed a nightclub. Just Geiger curves and vaginas everywhere. So we have this little like tense scene where Barbarella is tied to a pole and begging for help like a damsel and gets saved by Mark Hand? Is that his name?
Yeah, Mark Hand.
Yeah, played by, I forget his name. It's G something.
Ugo Tognazzi.
Ugo, yes. Who weirdly is also both in this and some classic art films, but we're in Italy/France. Of course he was.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so he rescues her, and as thanks, he asks to make love to her. Because, this is the 60s, and they weren't comfortable saying fuck on screen yet. So, but that's when they make, like, a weird sort of plot point / running joke where apparently sex on Earth has changed to a sort of weird mixture of pills and hand-holding, which we do get to
touch. Yes.
Yeah, which we do get to see later in the movie with the resistance leader.
Eldano.
Yeah. God, that guy's name. That guy's fucking name. Folks, if you're wondering, like, wait, Dildano, why is that funny?
That's like
take the A in the end out of the name, and what do you get?
That's like in Stifle and Ollie, Han Jabba.
Or like one of my favorite jokes from RLM, the great animal psychic Anita Horsecock. So yeah, basically, we imagine Dildano if he was here on Earth, he'd be a massive Steely Dan fan. Anyways, so but Mark Hand wants to do it the old-fashioned way, and when that happens, you get Jane Fonda, naked in furs, singing.
Yes, like her mind was blown.
And that becomes a running gag.
It does.
Because later on, after Mark Hand helps out Barbarella by unintentionally fucking up her ship, which I don't know the specifics of Barbarella's ship. They never tell us much about it, but
I think she meant to go subterranean.
Because how do you put stabilizers in reverse?
I'm wondering that myself.
Again, it's one of those things where it's like, don't question it. It's the best answer you can get. Don't question it.
Just pass the joint and roll with it, baby.
Yeah, so she ends up in a subterranean. Well, there's two things. One's the labyrinth where all of good and weird is settled in, and that's where she meets Pygar, what they call a little angel, played by John Philip Law.
Mm-hmm. And Professor Payton.
Yeah, played by Marcel Marceau, which you mentioned his first speaking role, and that's because Marcel Marceau was famous in France mainly as a mime before this. Mm-hmm. So Marcel Marceau was more a great physical comedian before they asked him to do this movie where he would have a speaking role. And the thing about Pygar when you first meet him is that he lost the will to fly.
That's what you call it.
Well, that's what the movie calls it. And then, after Pygar helps Barbarella by shooting guns, which Barbarella tells him to aim, because another aspect is that Pygar is blind.
Mm-hmm.
So, after that, Barbarella fucks dear Pygar, and after fucking a woman, he finds the will to fly again. Look,
You're inside, folks.
I don't want to state the obvious, but basically, insert ED joke here. But anyway, so Pygar finds a way to fly because, ding. Anyway, flies her to Sogo, which is the city of night where evil all coalesces over this lake of. Generously, we call it what happens if the mood slime from Ghostbusters was either mercury or lube, depending on the shot.
Mm-hmm.
And we learn that is rule under the Great Tyrant, which is Anita Poundbomb. Thing is, she has no name other than the Great Tyrant.
Great Tyrant, yes.
So they run. Basically, Sogo is essentially a weird sort of hedonistic, cramped, not paradise, but more like what happens if back alleys in Paris were designed by the same architects from 1984. I guess it's a weird way to put it.
It's a weird version of Brooklyn.
Pretty much. So you have... No, not that weird version of Brooklyn. That somehow relates to Max Headroom and dinosaurs, and we don't want to get into that.
No.
Anyway. So, Pygar and Barbarella first get separated because people just jack Barbarella from Pygar, and Barbarella doesn't do shit. Again, he's kind of a fucking ditz. But it's like, oh, you're talking about Jane Fonda. No, I'm talking about the character, and you know who would agree with me that she's kind of a fucking ditz? Jane fucking Fonda.
Jane Fonda, yes.
Anyway, so they get separated, and then it looked like she's about to get raped, but then the two assailants get stabbed and killed by a woman with an eye patch that we find out later is the great tyrant in disguise because she likes to be among the peasants sometimes.
Okay.
It's like I hate to call it a fetish, but it's also kind of a fetish considering everything in this movie is about basically in some way or shape or form sex. Yeah. So it's a fetish. It's a fetish.
It's fetish.
Yeah, so we get all that, and then after Pygar and Barbarella reunite and try to leave, they run into this what would lovingly be called what in the movie is called the Room of Ultimate Solution. Not what you think.
No.
It's more equivalent to the suicide booth in Futurama.
Yeah.
It's literally you go in there if you want to die.
Choose your destruction.
Yeah. Because why not? A place that thrives on pure unadulterated evil like it's Time Bandits, you might as well.
Don't touch it, it's evil.
Touch.
Of course.
Yeah. So after more sort of shenanigans, eventually Pygar and Barbarella get caught they meet up with a concierge who will later be revealed to be Dr. Duran Duran himself, played by Milo O'Shea.
Mm-hmm.
And you have the sort of thing of like exploring the depths of the underworld. If the underworld was a really weird and kind of kinky mod club in London somewhere that only your coolest friends knew about. Like, again, I don't mean to rag on the outfits. They were very like weird and like provoking at the time, but today you look at them, all you see is shoulder pads, boob cups, a lot of sheer, and a lot of plastic, and for some god knows why reason,
a lot of glitter.
A lot of fucking glitter. AKA, yeah. The glitter is like tiny daggers going into my eyes. So we then kind of threw shenanigans involving stuff like birds that were supposed to be hummingbirds, but they couldn't afford to import hummingbirds, so it was essentially just you put finches in a bow with Jane Fonda, who's covered in birdseed, and just blow a fan into it.
And look, they're attacking. Oh no.
Yeah, well, basically, granted, would you argue that's better or worse than Hitchcock with the birds?
Better.
Yeah.
Better. I mean, it looks awful as an effect, but it's safe.
Safer.
Safer.
Yeah. So after that attempt death by hummingbirds, which just go with it, she gets saved by a resistance leader, that being poor Dildano, played by David Hemmings. God.
Okay.
Like, again, we don't mean to, like, true... Well, because I get the feeling we read the comics, these names would make a lot more sense.
That would make a lot more sense, yeah. But
like, you listen to some of these names, like Mark Hand, Durand, Dildano, Pygar. It sound even Barbarella, as catchy as the name as it is, it's Barbara and Cinderella mashed together.
Yeah.
It's merging of consonants and vowels like a car crash on the I-5. And somehow it ended up killing James Manfield. Anyway,
it's better than the password that Dildano has for the Resistance, which is an actual name of a city.
Yes, because if you watch this movie and you think that password, that long, really weird password sounds familiar, that is Welsh for a Welsh town, and got famous in the 2010s for the record for the town with the longest name.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is, it's like, can you pronounce it? I can't. I don't. The problem is, speaking Welsh is essentially doing a Scottish accent while gargling salt and mouthwash. There's too much phlegm. I can't do it.
We don't do Welsh around here. I can stand a lot of people. The Welsh ain't one of them. Them and the garden trying to talk.
It's not that I hate the Welsh. It's just, for God's sakes, man, why does your language sound like I'm trying to do a dissertation while sucking a guy off?
Right.
Shout out to Wales.
Shout out to the Welsh.
Yeah, to Welsh and Wales. We love you. We love you.
We just like picking on you.
Yeah, and we say Wales. We're not saying the UK. We're saying Wales.
Wales, yeah.
Because, yes, Wales, we know you want to get away from them. Trust us, we did that too.
Anyway.
How can I say that about Wales? I can also say that about Southern Ireland. I can say that about Northern Ireland.
Okay. Anyways, you were saying.
Hey, again. Anyway, so after all that, the plan is to try to get to the Dark. I almost called her the Dark Queen, but that's the chick from fucking Battletoads.
No, that's actually her comic book name. La Reina Blanc. What's it? La Reina Noire. The Black Queen.
Huh.
Yeah.
Anyway, so their plan is to get to invade Sogo, get to the Great Tyrant and deal with her so to get Duran back to Earth. And the mission about Duran getting back to Earth is because he's the inventor of the positronic ray, which is basically technobabble for death ray. Although death ray is one way of saying it. The way they explain it in the movie, it's essentially forcing you going to the fourth dimension. But but the problem is that if you go by modern standards of the fourth dimension is time.
Yeah.
So
You're trying to aim for the fifth dimension. That's what it.
That would be the subatomic level, yeah.
Yeah. So, well, European sci-fi.
Well, that and quantum physics wasn't as advanced in the 60s.
Yeah.
So
we weren't there yet.
Yeah, we weren't there yet. So, but as they try to invade and get away to the Great Tyrant by way of basically invading her bedroom with an invisible key.
Yeah.
Which, again, was probably in the comic, so I'm not going to blame that and say the movie invented it. But also, the fuck is this pantomiming shit? We should have gotten Marcel in here.
Yeah, Marcel should have helped out with that stuff. You had him there in the first place.
He's a fucking mime, for God's sake.
Yeah.
So, it's basically revealed that when Barbarella is captured by Duran, it's revealed that basically he doesn't want to go back to Earth because the Matmos, which is the lake of mercury and or lube, depending on the shot, is I called it the moose line from Ghostbusters 2, and I'm not entirely off.
No.
Because it feeds off of negative energy and thoughts and gives the city of Sogo warmth and light in return.
Mm-hmm. So you have to be really, really wicked.
You kind of have to be a piece of shit. So, yeah,
to live there.
Again, it's the mood slime from Ghostbusters too, just without the other part. So Duran kind of got sort of... The thing is also is that they feed the Matmos, but apparently the Matmos kind of influences them and sort of gave Duran like ultimate knowledge, as he puts it.
Mm-hmm.
Which is basically sort of the mad scientist, which is science without ethics, I guess is the best way to put it.
Right.
So basically Milo Duran is essentially a mad scientist. That's mainly what he is. He's your classic mad scientist.
Mm-hmm.
And just to get out of the way, yes, we referenced it before, but since we're talking about him, we might as well mention it. Duran, with an extra D, is where the band Duran got their name from.
Yep.
Although apparently they denied it to like the 2000s for some reason when they eventually made Electric Barbarella. I don't know why they would randomly deny that they got their name from a 60s sci-fi show. I mean, you were an 80s new sci-fi movie. Sorry. You're in an 80s new wave band.
Mm-hmm.
One of your contemporaries is Mystical Knights of the Oingo Boingo. I think people are cool with the fact that Duran comes from the 60s sci-fi movie. You feel me?
And to play off of that, you had another band that named itself a playable character in a board game, science fiction board game, known as the Human League.
Oh, yeah! And that's the weird thing also, because in the 80s, 50s, and 60s, nostalgia for sci-fi was kind of a big deal.
Big deal, yeah.
Hello, Joe Dante. So, anyway, yeah, that tangent over. Yeah, folks, we're in. Trust us, we're getting there. So, after sort of the battle with the sex organ we mentioned earlier, which is essentially we made jokes about it, is essentially execution by pleasure.
Yes. The
problem is Barbarella has been fucking through the whole movie.
So her pleasure's high tolerant.
Yeah, so she literally outfucks the pleasure machine, causing it to go limp and flame out.
Yes.
Although the way Duran says it, I don't know why he said it like that, other than it's the 60s. I shouldn't think about it too hard.
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah, long story short, for some reason, he describes it as the word that rhymes with maggot and is evolved gay people.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it because we're on YouTube and I don't want to get I don't want to get a strike on Roy's channel. I know you don't give a shit, but at the end of the day, I don't want this getting flagged for hate speech. You feel me?
Gotcha.
Anyway, so after kind of this battle,
He called them English meatballs. How about that?
no, English cigarettes.
Okay, even better.
Yeah. So after that battle, and then that battle plus the birdcage, essentially the Resistance finds and repairs Barbarella's ships and gets the weapons and uses it to invade Sogo. While that's happening, Duran trapped the evil tyrant and Barbarella in essentially the Dark Tyrant's bedroom,
Mm-hmm.
which for some reason, if more than one person is in it at a time, the Matmos consumes them.
Yes.
Because reasons. But also for some reason, the Dark Queen's weapon in there is to unleash the Matmos upon the world.
Right.
Because reasons.
Because, yeah.
So after they Duran locks them in there with both keys, so they're trapped, they can't get out. The Great Tyrant decides, fuck it, I'm going to end the world because that bastard cannot have my throne.
Yes.
And does so.
Yes.
And so she unleashes the Matmos and consumes the world in this, and again, in either lube or mercury, depending on the shot.
Right.
So after all that basically happened, and Duran dies in great balls of fire trying to command the Matmos, because he is the last great Earth dictator, and all these other things. Which, okay, I didn't imagine our dictator being Friar Lawrence from Romeo and Juliet, but whatever. But thus, the Matmos consumes the world, and you think, in the movie, everybody dies. However, this part blows my mind because fucking what? Apparently, Barbarella is so good and pure and innocent, which bullshit, but whatever.
Yeah.
That the Matmos creates a bubble around her and the Great Tyrant because he doesn't want to eat Barbarella. And so,
are you shitting me?
That's how they fucking explain it. That's how the tyrant explains it.
Yeah, right. I'm like, are you fucking shitting me?
It's like, it made a bubble around us because it doesn't want to eat you. Like, what? What?
Right.
Convenient. Apparently, the Mambos has a sense of good and evil and taste. Okay. So the Matmos gets to the surface, and they find Pygar, who's passed out. And he was like, wait, wouldn't Pygar be dead? You know, like, as the tyrant explains.
Stop using reason. We're in a European sci-fi movie. Just go with it.
I can't. It's not even not using reason. It's more like, even in this world's logic, this makes no fucking sense.
Right.
So, like, the evil tyrant straight up says, apparently your friend wasn't digestible to the Matmos either. Basically saying that the sentient mercury, or lube, depending on the shot, tried to eat Pygar and said, nope, I don't feel like Angel today, and spits him out.
I don't want wings, goddammit. Woo!
What?
I don't want wings, goddammit. Woo!
And then, even better, Pygar is passed out, and they have to revive him to get him away from the Matmos. How does Barbarella do this? Not by waking him up, not by kissing him, but by grabbing his wings and stimulating him.
Yes.
Which, again, I get the feeling that there's an innuendo in there somewhere. So, after Pygar wakes up, they fly off the world and I guess head toward Barbarella's ship. But I say they because both Barbarella and Pygar stay with the Great Tyrant.
Yes.
And even Barbarella asks Pygar, why did he save her after all the horrible things she's done? Which Pygar responds, an angel has no memory. What in the holy mother of fuck does that even mean? Like,
it means he can forgive. He doesn't hold a grudge.
I guess, but the problem is the way it's said. It's not. An angel has no memory. Sounds like angels can't hold grudges. Angels have no memory. Sounds like if the man passes out for so long, he gets amnesia for some reason.
Yes, it sounds like that way too. Yeah,
but I imagine this might have been a mistranslation. Is again, we're going off a French comic, so I don't know. Maybe it makes more sense than the original French, but the way it's said makes it sound like Pygar forgive the evil tyrant because he forgot all the things she did.
So you're saying Pygar has Alzheimer's?
Or I guess. Or maybe early on, or somehow an angel got early onset dementia. I don't know. And after all that, that's how the movie ends.
Ends, yes.
And we end with a fucking swinging jazz tune about an angel, how an angel is love personified, which I guess feeds into that ending, but also okay. And the way it's phrased, it comes from a scene which either is a dream or actually happened. Was the Great Tyrant trying to fuck Pygar? I am not kidding.
No, yeah, I understand.
So, like, what? And that's just how the movie ends.
That's how it ends. So how would you rate this? I'm going 75.
I mean, the good does outweigh the nonsensical.
Mm-hmm.
And in a way, this is very much a turn your brain off and fucking enjoy yourself.
Well, this is more like roll a joint and enjoy yourself.
True. Or get a good taste of the sunshine paper and enjoy yourself, more likely considering some of the visuals.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I would go more 70, but I think 75 is good.
75 good, so we're rad.
Yeah, like
all right.
Like as much as I like sit, when was like, wait, you sound like you hate the movie. No, I just recognize this movie is fucking stupid. It's very pretty to look at, and the stories surrounding it are very cool, and you should look into them more. But the story itself is kind of fucking stupid.
Yes. Yes.
And to tie around to my first comment about how this wouldn't be my first choice for this era of sci-fi. I would say, like, even more, if you wanted more better, like, pulpier space exploration stuff. I mean, the obvious one is just watch Star Trek. But I would also say, like, something like Forbidden Planet is probably more the direction you want to go first before this.
I would go First Men in the Moon.
Yeah, or like
Quatermass in the Pit.
Yeah, because weirdly how that's technically sci-fi, but that's also Edgar Allan Poe. Long story.
No. That's Quatermass in the Pit. You're thinking Last Man on Earth.
Oh yeah. Fair enough. But if you wanted to go to like the more like true like science fiction, sci-fi, like around that era in particular,
The
I
Time
would probably
Travelers, Destination Inner Space,
the original Forbidden Journey.
Forbidden Journey, Time Barrier,
Um,
Day of the Triffids.
if you want to get really fucking weird and still French, Fantastic Planet or Savage Planet.
Planet Savage, yeah.
Yeah.
10th Victim.
And it also is like if you want to explore like a more new.
New Wave, Alphaville.
True.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to explore more like hardcore science fiction from around that era as well, I would say probably like films later on like Westworld, Omega Man, Logan's Run, Silent Running,
yeah,
Soylent Green, probably.
No Blade of Grass.
Mm-hmm. Andromeda Strain, Colossus, The Forbidden Project.
Right.
And like even if you want to go into like oh, what about like crazy Italian French genre? I was like, there's honestly like even for like European sci-fi, it might be closer to the top of the list, but it might not be the first thing I think of. Again,
the thing about European sci-fi is more stylish than practical.
True, but also like if you want to go to like that more style over sort of style of European genre film specifically, I mean, Danger Diabolique, Satanic,
Doctor Justice,
maybe Modesty Blaze if you want to go more British with it.
No, they did a lot more.
Or you could just say fuck it and just go straight to like Italian to the Eurospy. Well, again, more the Eurospy, or even like
the James Bond knockoffs, like in like Flint,
Casino
Row, The Silencers.
Technically, the original Casino Royale. Long story there.
The Avengers.
The original, yeah.
Yep.
Although, ironically, you could accidentally tie that Eurospy stuff with the Avengers, not just because of British spy show, but also James Bond ended up being in its movie. God, if we do that movie one of those days, I would love to figure out what the hell was the mindset.
Right.
Anyway. So yeah, it's not that Barbarella is not essential. It is. It's just
Barbarella.
What did I say? Barbarella?
Barbarella, yeah.
I don't know. We've been ranting for a while. I got lightheaded.
So we got 75. You're cool with that? Is there any graphic language? No.
No.
Maybe a little bit.
Maybe because there is like sexual stuff, but like it's a lot more weirdly clinical and technobabble than anything else.
Right. How much violence? A bit.
A bit. I mean, there's only a little bit of blood, and that's from getting nibbled on by killer dolls. Because reasons. And because reasons.
Any nudity, sexual content? A bit more.
I was tempted to say a lot, but yeah, a lot of it, aside from the full-on like implied sex scenes, like we don't really see them. It's a lot more innuendo than anything else.
So I'd say a bit. You did get
a bit more.
Maybe
a bit more. Especially because you don't see her full front, but you do see Jane Fonda naked.
Right. Is it family friendly? No. Nope.
I'm sorry. You're asking me a movie with a machine that fucks you to death is family friendly.
Fun for the whole family.
Christ.
How much entertainment value? A lot.
A lot. Yeah, like again, it's very cool to look at. It's very cool to see, but also, if you don't mind your sci-fi a bit more stupid, you're
Right.
gonna have a lot of fun.
If you just want to roll one and watch something,
Yeah, like you don't feel like getting philosophical with Easy Rider. You just want to sit there and ogle Jane Fonda while you're high as balls. There you go.
swamp. Easy right there.
Yeah.
And now for our scale, would you watch it at the drive-in at the time? Would you buy the physical media? Would you stream it or forget it altogether?
I'll be honest, I definitely would try to watch it the driving at the time with the addition of if somehow, some way, someone could slip me acid while I watch it.
Like unknowingly slip you acid. Like you're just drinking.
No, essentially, I want to watch this movie on acid that I drive through.
You want the sneak attack instead of the full.
Yeah, like basically full go ask Allison on me. Alice in Wonderland. Here you go, motherfucker.
Okay.
Have fun.
I don't have to throw an orange at you.
Oh, don't worry about that.
Okay. I'm not gonna drop no freaking tape machine in the tub either.
Yeah, do it with the peak. At the peak. Ah, motherfucker. Although ironically, I'm not as Chicano or as Samoan to play that role.
Right. So
Also, you're more the Wolfman than me. You're more the werewolf than me.
Yeah. Yes, I am. So I would buy the physical media.
Yeah, this would be. I would imagine this would definitely be especially if there's really good like special editions or like Blu-rays. I imagine this would be really good to have.
Mm-hmm. I do know it's on 4K. I think Arrow put it up. I'm not sure.
It could be Arrow. I also think possibly Shout might have.
Shout might have done it. Shout might have done it. Yeah, I want to say it, but I always confuse the two. I don't know why.
Shout and Arrow. Well, they're both boutique labels that kind of specialize in like the cult and the geeky, but also they kind of build themselves on finding and saving projects that most people forgot about.
Right.
Like Shout does that with a lot of TV shows and cult films, and Arrow does that with the more cultier cult films that me and you watch.
Right.
Like they're not on the level of like a Vinegar Syndrome or a Severin.
Right.
Where they pull shit that were so obscure, even the VHS era. I haven't heard half of the shit they put out, but
yeah.
I mean,
shout out to Vinegar Syndrome, shout out to Fun City, shout out to
Agfa,
all the guys who work with Vinegar Syndrome.
Yeah, like like these are boutique labels that decided the Suckling needed a Blu-ray release. A movie where the monster is a mutated fetus.
Shot in Kentucky.
Cult films, everybody. They're fucking nuts. Anyway.
Preserved the culture. No, shout out to Vinegar Syndrome and every all the boutique labels. From 88 to Cauldron.
Yeah, Vinegar Syndrome, Severin, Agfa,
Fun
I know
City.
There's Fun City. I know there's another one that recently brought back Jacko, I think got a release on one of those labels.
Terror Films.
Was it?
I think it's Terror. Don't quote me.
Anyway.
So, is that it for Barbarella?
That's about it. It's your choice next.
My choice. Okay, so I've got 4 movies. 3 of them period pieces. 1 was made in the time of its release. 1 in ancient times, 1 in 1800s Sweden, 1 in the beginning of the industrial area, and 1 made in the first years of the communication era. Which do you choose?
Define communication era specifically.
So communications started in the late 40s and it ended, I'm going to say, in the late 2000s.
Okay, so starting with like the development of like wider telephone and TV stuff, and
Right.
arguably ending with the
We were
widespread
dealing,
stream of the internet.
we were
Okay.
dealing with new mediums of recording and receiving, that sort of deal. Which
You
do
know what? I I've had you know after I want to stay in Europe. Why don't we do I'm curious about 1800 Sweden. Like, what do you got for me there?
All right. So next week we will be doing The Ugly Stepsister,
Oh, I
2025.
I've been meaning to see that movie.
Well, I caught you. I caught you interest. All right.
No,
So
I've been hearing that movie is fucking insane. And judging
yes,
by Roy's face, we're gonna have some fun.
yes. So time for the shilling. Yay! I need to insert claps here. Doc, go ahead.
Well, we've already showed my critic list, but at the ending, let's do it again. You can find me on Critic List under Chaotic Doctor, where I post reviews, lists, including things like, again, like the ones we mentioned. I've reviewed Head, Atomic Cafe, Two Things, Stargate, Man of Steel. I've also done stuff like, again, also like the Keep. Like if you want more sci-fi, I've talked about the Keep, or if you want more interesting, weird, sort of fun little culty films, I've done The Adventures of Mark Twain, which is essentially Will Vinton deciding to do Mark Twain in claymation, while also for some reason scarring children with a drama mask as Satan. I'm not even kidding,
No.
but yeah, if you want to check this out, check that out. Me on Critic List. The only social media I really use and promote is Blue Sky. That is chaotic.doctor.bluesky.social, where you can find me basically just kind of retweeting stuff I like. Sometimes maybe I put my thoughts around stuff. Will warn you though, that is very 18 plus and not safe for work. Because hey,
It's a porn account.
yeah, more like I'm a pervert, but I'm a gentleman about it.
Okay, a libertine. Okay.
Other than that, if you want to hear me more vocally rant, again, check us out here at the Starlite, including the minis here on Roy's channel, here on YouTube, but also you can check out Starlight, Red Light, OTEP over the years, where I curate and guide Roy through hip hop for the 2010s. You can also check me, Roy, and our friends out over at the other shows on Wolfset, being Late to the Murder Party, and a Monday. We recently started up the Game Den, where we just randomly talk about random gaming topics that interest us at the time. First episode is out now, where we talk about what the world would be like if Super Mario Brothers never happened. Go check that out there. Give Okami some love. That's on Podbean, but that's also on YouTube over at the Wolfman Production channel. You can check it out there. And that's about it for me from showing. Roy, tell them where you can find you and the rest of us.
You got some love mail, some hate mail, some European sci-fi mail, some European comic mail, some booby mail. You just want to say hi, send it to Starlight Podcast at protonmail.com. I also have a Twitter. It's capital R, capital L, capital P, capital S, Starlight, RLP, Starlight. Give some recommendations, some commendations. Just say hi. We'd love to hear from you. Also, I also do stuff for Critic List. I'm working on a list right now. I'm doing these reviews over there to help critics out, get some crowd to come over here too. And just hanging out, just having a great time. And with that being said, what you got anything else, man? No. I'm also on OTEP, Red Light, Starlight, over at Wolf's Den Podcast at Podbean.com. And go check it out at the Wolf's Den Productions tab on YouTube. We'd love to hear from you. And with that being said, put your speaker back on the post. Turn on your high beams, make sure you see the proper signs on the road, and exit accordingly. Goodbye. Do you like Cinderella?
If you try to make me dance in some hot glass slippers, motherfucker, I will end you.
Oh no. I'm just giving you forewarning for next week. Bye. And